First, I want to note that this is Suicide Prevention Week. In a given year, roughly 1 in 5 Americans suffer from some kind of mental illness. 1 in 5. As you know, the House passed landmark reforms to change the way our healthcare system deals with mental illness. This legislation is not going to solve all of the problems, but it's a very, very important step, and we really hope that this bill becomes law. Next, even in a government as divided as ours, there are some things that should remain above politics. That, of course, includes dealing with public health crises such as the Zika virus. That is why the House, in July, the House passed a plan to make sure that the resources go where they are needed most. I will remind you that this plan is a compromise. It is the full funding level that the Senate supported, and it is only partially offset. Yet the Senate Democrats voted not once, not twice, but 3 times. The Senate Democrats voted 3 times to block this. They need to get past the politics and work with us to protect the public. Another matter that should be above politics is making sure that our men and women in uniform, they get the resources they need to do our job. We have passed the defense authorization bill for decades on a bipartisan basis. This week, we learned of a Pentagon memo that lays out in detail a plan to, and I'm quoting, play hardball with our national defense bill. This bill is a bill that both parties have always worked on together. It provides for a pay raise for our troops. But the memo describes a veto of that pay raise, and I'm quoting again, to use it as a principal weapon at our disposal. When you consider our readiness crisis, it is an abdication of responsibility for this administration and its officials to use our military as political leverage. Quite frankly, they ought to be ashamed of this memo. My hope is that Secretary Carter will recant this strategy and work with us in good faith to pass a defense bill. That is exactly why we are offering a better way for national security, so that we can truly build a 21st century military and have a strategy that keeps us safe and doesn't play politics with our military. You can learn more about this by going to better.gop. With that, I'd be happy to answer your questions. A little louder. I'm not, because we don't have the votes right now. So it's not something that I'm thinking about, because I know the votes on this issue pretty well from doing TPA, and we don't have the votes. And they, quite frankly, I think they've got to fix this. They got to fix it, and they haven't done that.
You said that you want the party to be the proposition party, that 2016 should be a battle of ideas. Yet Donald Trump still has not put forward his plan to defeat ISIS. Are you urging him to do so? Do you think the American people have a right to know his plan before they?
Well, we've put out a plan to defeat ISIS. I'd say this is look at the Republican Party and look at what the House Republicans have offered in our better way. We put out a 67-point plan to bolster our military and to defeat ISIS and to go after the ideology of radical Islamic jihad overseas and to how to address homegrown jihadists. So I would say look at what we are offering in conjunction with our nominee. Yeah.
Zika, one of the issues is this family planning money. Are you open to funding that allows Planned Parenthood to...
Now, first of all, there's no Planned Parenthood in this bill. And to put an earmark for Planned Parenthood is something that we won't do. Chad.
We're going to have this vote tomorrow on JASTA and suing Saudi Arabia, victims of terrorism. What do you say to folks like Michael Mukasey and John Bolton, who wrote an op-ed yesterday in the Wall Street Journal expressing concern about sovereignty issues, relations with Saudi Arabia? I mean, what is the downside of a piece of legislation like this?
Well, I think they raise compelling concerns, but there are compelling concerns on the other side of this as well. And I think that the votes are very overwhelmingly in favor. This bill passed unanimously in the United States Senate. So I think that those concerns have been taken under consideration, and I think members are acting accordingly, and that's why this bill will pass. Yeah, Susan.
Harry Reid said that the reason the health care law is collapsing now is that Republicans refuse to work with them on reopening the law and improving it. How do you respond to that?
I met with the Blue Cross Blue Shield actuaries. I shouldn't quote people, but actuaries will tell you this law was going to fail. I've met with actuaries who say it's failing 2 years ahead of schedule. This law was designed in such a way that a death spiral, this is an actuarial term, I think was all but inevitable. And no amount of tinkering around the margins was going to salvage Obamacare from imploding under its own and collapsing under its own weight. United has pulled out. Aetna is pulling out. I think Kaiser says that 31% of counties in America have just one choice. That's a monopoly. It basically doesn't even feel like you have insurance anymore because your deductibles are so high, not to mention double-digit premium increases that families are getting socked with. No amount of tinkering around this law is going to fix it. Again, Susan, this is why we as Republicans have come together to offer a better way forward on health care. We are showing our fellow citizens what a Obamacare replacement looks like and how we can get to the objective we all share of getting prices down, having more choice and more competition, and having patients be the center of our healthcare system and their doctors, and not government bureaucrats who are basically imploding our entire healthcare system. Yeah. Monty, I was going right here. Sorry. I'll go to you next. Say that again?
At the candidate forum last night, Donald Trump had high praise for Putin, and I'm just curious sort of what you think about that, if you're concerned at all about
I read the little snippet. Let me say this about Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is an aggressor that does not share our interests. Vladimir Putin is violating the sovereignty of neighboring countries. It certainly appears that he is conducting in state-sponsored cyber attacks on what appears to be our political system. That is not acting in our interests, and that is an adversarial stance, and he is acting like an adversary. Manu.
Just to follow up on that, are you concerned, though, of Donald Trump praising Vladimir Putin, someone who said...
I made my points about Putin clear right there. I'll just leave it at that. Yeah. Yeah, I just want to hear from our members. So, as you know, my style of leadership is to have a consensus-driven, bottom-up style of leadership. Our members have not had a chance to talk with each other for a couple of months, so we're going to be discussing end of fiscal year funding resolutions, CR strategies, and I want to hear from our members, what we think, how we ought to proceed going forward, so that we have a continuing resolution that will be done by the end of this month. So we're just going to have a planning conference on it. You're probably going to ask about the IRS. That planning conference is next week.
So, since we were last in this room, Mr. Speaker, Donald Trump hired a campaign CEO who said he's sick of Paul Ryan rubbing his social justice Catholicism in my nose every second, digging into the well of anti-Catholic animus. That's a new one. Donald Trump said that generals have been reduced to rubble. He said the military is an embarrassment, and like my colleague said, he praised Vladimir Putin and said that he's a better leader than the President of the United States. Do you still think that Hillary Clinton is the worst thing that can happen?
You think I'm going to stand up here and be election pundit? I've got other things to do in this job. Yeah, he's the nominee of our party because he won our nomination fair and square. I'm not going to sit up here and do the tit for tat on what Donald said last night or the night before in Hillary versus Donald. That is not my job, and I'm not going to be the election year pundit commenting on all these little things. I'll leave it at that. No, because I want to hear from our members first. We want to talk as a family, as a team first before we proceed with any kind of plan to go forward and engaging with the White House. So again, I want to hear from our members first. I want to have a good conversation with them before we engage. Yeah, I talked with Mitch all the time.
I wanted to ask, I know you don't want to do the day-to-day sort of machinations.
Good, because I won't.
But you are going to have a recess in a few more weeks where you are off through the election. I'm curious what your plans are. How hard are you going to work? What are you going to be doing to see it?
I'm going to be working with House Republicans. I'm going to be doing some Senate. I'm doing a thing with Todd Young pretty soon. I think Rob Portman's soon after that. But my job as Speaker of the House, politically, is to help make sure we preserve our House majority. I'm going to be working on that. And by the way, helping preserve the House majority helps our ticket up and down. It helps our nominee all the way around. So making sure that House Republicans are running strong, which we will be good for all Republicans.
Is there any possibility of a TPA vote? The Vice President said he wants one. Is it possible that some side issues could...
You bring it up, it's going to go down. I don't think we should bring up a bill that goes down. Jonathan.
Your old colleague, Judd Gregg, is at a hearing today where he said there needs to be budget process reform and so on. But one thing he specifically talked about was a BRAC-style commission to take a look at entitlements, taxes, and so on.
I'd rather just pass, a budget that shows what we want to do. Take a look at our entitlement reforms in a better way. That shows you exactly, the big drivers of our debt, as you know, Jonathan, are our healthcare entitlements. We are showing exactly what we think the solution is to save these entitlements from bankruptcy, which also saves the country from bankruptcy. I think we should just do our jobs in Congress instead of, I was on one of these commissions. They're nice exercises, but they're no substitute for Congress actually doing its job and having a president who is willing to actually take this issue on. The president has never, ever given us a budget that ever balances. He's never proposed to balance the budget. We need to get on with that.
But now people would say that none of that, Congress acting, President acting, nothing substantive has happened in the 6 years since.
Yeah, Barack Obama's been our president. I rest my case.